mission statement several years ago, and so many things have changed since we did that. Our core ministry has changed. Our online ministry is doing well. We have a school that we're expanding from the ECC into a full school, and we have a growing Oasis ministry that is becoming a significant part of the church. So, but we're confident, that's what we have done. Now we're confident that God will provide us with additional opportunities in the future. But what we have to do is to get ready to meet these opportunities so we know how to handle them. So what we are doing, we're putting together a new vision for the next 5 to 10 years, and where do we want our church to be? So without any more detail, I would like to have the pastor open the meeting with a prayer and also talk about this exciting process that we're going to go through. So thank you.
Absolutely. Curtis Dieterding, part of the pastoral staff here at Zion Lutheran Church and the school. So it's really an exciting time, just as Terry had mentioned. And I would like to start off with a prayer. And then I'd like to give you a little bit of the history about how we got to this place in time, okay? All wise and knowing God, we know your plans and your ways are not always our plans and ways. As we prepare to seek your plans and ways for us here at Zion Lutheran Church and School, lead us by your Spirit so that we might discover how to better use our gifts and talents in ways that please and glorify you. Give us ears to hear Pastor Hoyer's presentation this day so that together we can prepare ourselves to revisit our mission and to revisit our vision here at Zion. Guided by your will for us, continue to lead us into the future here in this place and at this time, empowered by your Spirit, who has given us your Spirit by our Savior Jesus Christ, in whose precious and holy name we pray. Amen. So actually, what I wanted to present before I introduced Pastor Hoyer, and I know he's anxious because he wants to get back on the road and go home, because he actually has a full-time parish, and he does this job as well. And so I am just really excited about introducing him here in a minute. I want to give you a little bit of background, a little bit of history of how we ended up here at this spot. And actually, Terry, Jim Reynolds, and myself, we have wordsmithed this presentation to tell you. So I'm going to read it. I don't want to miss anything that somebody has contributed to this. So please give an ear. I'll try not to be too elboro in reading this. So many opportunities God has already sent here to this place, resulting in some exciting changes that have happened in our ministries here, especially in the recent years. I am especially excited about our various outreach programs. That would be me. Our Oasis service, and of course, the expansion of our school. At this time, those are two big ones, but we still have mission to Harlem Heights. We still have mission to those who are here in the area, young families and so forth. And so we want to keep that focus as well, and especially to those who are independent elders here in our community as well. We still are doing programming and working with all of those different gifts that God has given us to use to serve our community. To get ready for the future opportunities, an up-to-date vision for our ministry is required. The idea of updating our vision began with informal discussions with some Zion members and was focused on where we want to be in the next 5 to 10 years and how to best develop a plan to get there. It was quickly realized among that group that for such a plan to be successful, it must involve all segments of our church and our school, both our associate members and our full-time members. To our great good fortune, we learned that our mother church, St. Michael's, had recently completed such a visioning process. It prepared them to embark on a call process to celebrate the long ministry of their pastor, John Zender, as he approached retirement. Reports from St. Michael's show how an effective visioning plan sets the stage for a productive call process. While a call process is closely related to visioning, it proceeds independently of the visioning process. The visioning plan provides clear guidance to where the church feels the Lord is leading it and allows it to describe the characteristics of a pastor who would successfully lead the church. St. Michael's utilized the services of Clarity Navigator, led by Pastor Jacob Hoyer. We got really excited about that when we heard that because there are going to be some big transitions coming up within the next 5 or 10 years here at Zion on top of what we're already experiencing right now. So it just seems like the right way to go at this point. And we've also presented this to the executive board, and they've approved utilizing this service. By the way, Pastor Hoyer, you're a 6th generation Missouri Synod Lutheran? Wow, I didn't know we went back that far. Yeah, because I'm a 4th generation, but I just... Okay, because I'm like, okay, all right. I'll go with that, because I'm like, well, I know we go back pretty far, almost to the time at the beginning of the church as well, but not that I'm competing, you know. I do want to mention that while my retirement is a few years off and I fully intend to stay until a new pastor is actually fully engaged in the visioning plan and process here at Zion Lutheran Church, discussions here have clearly shown that Zion does not want to utilize an intentional interim pastor. Most everybody I have talked to concur with that, and we have President Rocky on board as well with that. So we want to make sure that he's fully engaged in this process. The executive board has approved retaining Pastor Hoyer to lead us through this effort, and now it's my pleasure to introduce to you Pastor Hoyer. I wanted to say Joel Hoyer, but it's Jacob Hoyer. He's related to some folks I knew from my past. So
Yes,
cool.
thank you.
Nice to have you here with us. I'm glad you arrived safely.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, and I'm happy to be here, and as Pastor Dieterding said, I do have a drive, but I'm so grateful that this is like probably one of the most inconvenient times for you all to be here at church this afternoon, but it let me leave my house after the sun came up today, so I was happy about that. It's about a 4.5-hour drive, but like Pastor Dieterding said, I've been working with St. Michael the last few years, and so I'm very familiar with that drive, so it's good to be with you today. So as Pastor mentioned, I'm an LCMS pastor, 6th generation Lutheran pastor, and so grew up in the church, actually grew up in Central Florida, just north of Orlando. And I've always had an appetite and an interest in bivocational ministry. So led the planting of a church in 2015. That church was coming up on 10 years, and we continue to lead that church. But I like having another job in addition to pastoring the church, just philosophically. If you're interested in that, we'll grab lunch and I'll tell you all about it. Yes, yeah. So in 2017, I started working with churches to clarify mission and vision. And actually, coincidentally, David Ertley, who's up in the balcony right now and helps you all here, he was on the vision team at my first client church. So I worked with a church in Clark, New Jersey, and David was on that vision team, and so we know each other already. And so I've been working with churches now since 2017 to help them clarify who we are and where we're going. And so I'll tell you about the process I use today, and my goal is to really give you just enough information to where you can ask good questions, because I much prefer to share information in response to something you're thinking about. But if we tried to do that now, you wouldn't even know what to ask. So I'll share with you the process and a couple of the key outputs of the process, and then I'll love to hear from you about how you see God might use that process here at Zion. Sound good? Awesome. All right, so we'll go to the first slide, and I've got a screen back there. You all have 2 screens here. So I may gesture that way. Just know that I'm gesturing to that. So you probably are used to that already around here. Cool. So this right here, these 5 icons, you have one of the handouts on the way in lines up with this graphic. And it's 5 what we call master tools that outline a process to clarify identity and direction. And we call this the vision framing process because one of the key outputs is a vision frame. But intrinsic to the process is saying, before we can talk about where we're going, we have to talk about who we are. And we say that all churches are called to glorify God and make disciples, but Zion in Fort Myers is called to glorify God and make disciples in some unique way. And we want to discover the uniqueness of your church before we begin to discern the vision that God has for your church. And so we do that in 5 phases. The first phase we call the rethink phase. And in the rethink phase, we're trying to answer the question, what obstacles are we facing? And there the master tool that you see is we call pumpkin jars. The icon is a bunch of little jars. And we're leaning into a metaphor that's based on a story about a pumpkin farmer who goes out into his field at the beginning of the growing season. And there's all these little baby pumpkins. And he takes one of them and puts it in a jar. And then at the end of the growing season, he comes and he sees pumpkins of all different shapes and sizes, big ones, little ones, fat ones, long ones, all different kinds of pumpkins. But that pumpkin that he put in the jar filled the jar and nothing more. It took exactly the shape of the jar. This is wild. If you go on Google, look up molded pumpkins, you'll see all kinds of molded pumpkins that he'll make. They make them in the face of Frankenstein, all kinds of things, okay? But the point of the story for our purposes is, around our churches, there are all sorts of pumpkin jars that can tend to limit our uniqueness. Assumptions about how we should do things or the way things should look, inherited patterns that we've had over the generations that we just forget to question. So when we begin the work of understanding the unique church that God has built here, the first thing we do is consider, what obstacles are we facing? What are the things that are keeping us from living into the fullness of the unique church that God made us to be? So that's phase 1, rethink. Okay? The next phase, once we've answered those questions, the next phase we move into is what we call the uncover phase. This is where we uncover the unique identity that God has been building at Zion. And so what we're saying is, for decades here, God has been building a church like no other. And if we're going to discern what the uniqueness of that church is, we use it to do that. We use a tool that we call the kingdom concept, and it's illustrated as a simple Venn diagram. It's designed to answer the question, what can we do best? And so that Venn diagram represents 3 things that we look at about the uniqueness of your church: our unique place, our unique people, and our unique passions. Place, people, and passions. And so what we're saying is, God has been building a unique church here for decades. He's been doing it by putting you in a particular place, bringing you particular people, and giving you particular leaders. And so the question of place is, what are the unique needs and opportunities in the place where God has put us? People is, what unique skills and capabilities does God draw together in us? And passions is, what particular focus most animates and energizes our leadership? We engage those 3 questions, and as we answer them, we begin to discern the overlap of those 3 things. It's the overlap of those 3 things that we call our kingdom concept. That's the distillation of what makes us unique. And so before we move into naming our identity, we uncover that uniqueness. And that kingdom concept becomes foundational work, or like an underpainting for all the other work that we do. So the kingdom concept that we develop in the process is not something that ends up on a website or a brochure, but it does give us a deeper understanding of what makes Zion unique, so we can begin to put that into language in the next phase of the process. So that phase we call talk up. And this is where we get into our first key deliverable of the process, which we call the vision frame. We call it the talk up phase because we're taking that uniqueness from the previous steps, and we're beginning to put language to it that answers 4 big questions of leadership. What are we doing? Why do we do what we do? How do we do what we do? And when are we successful? So those are 4 key questions of leadership that summarize our identity. We're using the metaphor of a frame because if I stood here and said to you, where is God taking Zion over the next 5 to 10 years, right? Well, the possibilities are endless. We need some way to hone in on answering that question of vision. And so the way of honing in is, like I said earlier, before we talk about where we're going, we're going to talk about who we are. And so the vision frame becomes a summary of our identity that gives context to how we're painting that picture of the future. If I look off in the distance, God could do anything with Zion. This is the broad expanse of the picture of what could happen. But what we do is we take that frame of our unique identity and we lay it over that image to say, this is the one thing that God is doing with us uniquely. And so that vision frame becomes the context necessary to hone in on what God is doing with us in this place, in this time. And so I'll talk more about the vision frame in just a moment. But what we say is that that vision frame is what holds our vision together. So it's what focuses our vision, gets us looking in the right direction. It's a summary of our identity that helps us to focus in on what God is doing with us. Once we've clarified identity, we can move into that go-ahead phase, where we look through the frame to paint a picture of our future. This is vision proper. It answers the question, where is God taking us? And we call it vision proper because if you said, we need a vision for our church, this is probably what you meant. But we deal with identity first in the vision frame before we get to vision proper in the vision work. So that vision proper becomes a 5 to 10 year strategic plan that includes 3-year goals, an annual focus for the whole church, and then a process of keeping things executing on a 90-day rhythm and resetting goals every 90 days. Okay? So we build a plan that fits that and train into executing on it in an ongoing way. So that go-ahead phase that's where we build your strategic plan. And then the last icon on this process outline, it says it's the live out phase. This is where we begin to answer the question, how do we live out our vision? So whereas each of the first 4 steps in this process are discrete steps, if I work with you, I would come on site and we would begin and complete those while I'm here. The live out phase is something you're going to do in an ongoing way. And so part of the process that I facilitate is to train your leaders into integrating vision into everything you do as a church. But that's going to continue on after I disengage from the church. And so that live out phase is a set of tools that help us to learn how to integrate vision into everything that we do. So that's the overview of the whole process. Some of you are starting to go, okay, that's enough information for the rest of the day. But I'm going to tell you more about the vision frame in just a moment, but I'll pause here. Okay? Any thoughts or questions, things that you heard so far that you love, things you could even share things that you don't love, or questions you have, just about that process as an overview. Anything that's going to ring in your head and make it difficult to listen as we go forward. Go ahead and share whatever's on your mind. Perfect. Yeah, you like the idea that we're gonna uncover a unique church, not just a generic church. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Anybody else, something that you like or a question that you have before we move on? She just said, I particularly like the word unique. That's what she said. So she said, I like that we're going to talk about the uniqueness of our church, not just how we could be like any other church. Yeah. Okay, great. Go ahead. Yes. No, so what we typically do is we walk through the process with a team of 8 to 12. So that's a good question for this stage. So when I was saying phase and all this and we do this work, so typically what's happening is the church would identify a vision team. Recommended the size of that team is 8 to 12 people that represents a cross-section of the congregation. And what happens is this outline, for each phase of the process, except for the vision frame, I'm on site for about a day usually, working with that team to answer some of those questions. The vision frame, each side of the frame gets 1 day. So in total, we're talking about 8 to 10 meetings over 8 to 10 months. Okay? So it's about a once-a-month engagement with that team of 8 to 12 people. There are key points in the process where we engage a wider swath of the congregation to share with them the progress and get their input. And the reason we keep that team pretty tight is because we're trying to make decisions by consensus. So we want to get everybody on that team on the same page. So the bigger you make that team, the harder that is to do. So what we do is we ask the congregation to prayerfully consider who the people are for this time in the history of the church to lead that process. And we work with a team of 8 to 12. Does that answer your question? Great. Yes, ma'am. Yes, so remind me of your first name again? Joyce is bringing up that the congregation expands and contracts with the seasons of the year, and said it's almost like it's two different congregations. Would it include people from both? Pastor nodded his head and said yes. My initial default answer was going to be, we'll figure that out. So, but I would imagine so. And Pastor said yes, so he said yes. And again, just to be clear, a big part of today is for you all to meet me to meet you, us to talk about this together. And as far as I'm concerned, no commitments have been made yet, so we can figure that out. Okay. Well, any other questions or comments before we talk more about the vision frame? Correct. Yeah. Yes. So that would be a decision to be made here. So I don't dictate how that team is chosen. I offer recommendations.
That's why I just stood up, just so that I can explain this a little bit. So they actually, the Clarity Group actually has suggestions on who you want to try to identify for that particular group, because it'll be new people, old people. I mean that in the nicest way. And you've got from different aspects of ministries and missions of the church. So we definitely need to make sure we identify with those folks. And we started off with a group just talking about the future. I mentioned that earlier. It was like a visioning committee, and that committee actually presented to the executive board. And it was the executive board that said, this is something we really need to seriously embrace as we're moving forward. So that's how we got to this point. And I asked that very question of Jacob, and I said, how do you go about picking them? And he actually gives us some guidelines on how to do that. So
yeah, there's like a handout that talks about how to hit a cross-section of age, a cross-section of positional and non-positional leadership, cross-section of people who've been with the congregation a long time, people who are relatively new. So you try to get a balance. Yep. Cool. Well, let me tell you more about the vision frame, which is our key deliverable. And Pastor Dieterding mentioned how we used this process at St. Michael to aid in their pastoral transition process. And so we can go to the next slide. And the next one, sorry. There we go, perfect. At St. Michael, what we did was we completed the vision frame, we named the identity of the church, and then we paused. And they called their next pastor. And then once that next pastor arrived, then we worked on the vision for the church, the direction. And so the reasoning for that, and I'm just prefacing so you understand which components of identity you might want to firm up when. In that process, the reason we did it that way is so that they could make sure they called a pastor who was a good culture fit and fit the identity of the church, but still left room for that next senior pastor to help set the vision of the direction for the church. And so that was what we were able to do was, once with the vision frame set, I was able to offer input on saying, well, it seems like this is the kind of pastor you need to be looking for. They were able to find one, and then once he came, then I re-engaged with the congregation to set the vision. So let's talk about the vision frame. So again, the vision frame is designed to answer the first 4 of 5 irreducible questions of leadership. That's what are we doing, why do we do what we do, how do we do what we do, and when are we successful? So the first of those, next slide, is what are we ultimately doing? And that's mission. So mission we represent with a compass. And whenever you guys are ready, we'll go to the next slide. Mission we represent with a compass because mission is our North Star. So when we get lost, we come back to mission. And that helps us find our way again. Okay? And so that's what you see on the right side of the vision frame. Mission answers, what are we ultimately doing? And we say it's our missional mandate. And here, each side of the frame, we're going to give a missional reorientation. And in that sense, when we say missional as an adjective, we're referring to the overarching mission of God. So God's overarching mission to rescue and redeem all of creation, what's our part in that? What's our mandate under the mission of God? That's the mission statement of our congregation. And so we begin in mission because we can't talk about anything else until we talk about mission. We say mission is question 0. It's the question before all other questions. Until we talk about what God has put us here to do, we can't talk about any other aspect of our culture or mechanics. And so for that reason, we say if there was a person named Joe who came around our church for a while, got involved in our programs, got to know our people, we'd say that mission is what Joe hears, okay? What Joe hears. Everywhere Joe goes around our congregation, he hears us talking about our mission, okay? The next component of the frame we'll talk about is values. If we can advance, and then again, perfect. So next we'll talk about values, okay? So values we represent with a flame because values are the fire that burn inside of us. This is what wakes us up in the morning, gets us to come out at 1:30 on a Saturday to talk about the direction of the church because the fire that burns inside of us, that's what drives us forward. And so values answer why do we do what we do? So each of the other three sides of the frame are going to point back to mission. So mission is what we're ultimately doing. Values is why we do what we do. What drives us to accomplish our mission? What pushes us forward? Okay? And so for that reason, we call values our missional motives. Our missional motives. The missional motivation for our church. I like to say that mission and values together summarize our church culture. Values are the feeling behind everything that we do. In every environment that you're in, you should feel all of the values coming through. So for that reason, we say that values are what Joe feels. Mission is what Joe hears us talking about everywhere. Values are what Joe feels in every environment. So mission and values summarize our church culture. We're putting language to culture. Next slide is strategy. So strategy we represent with a flashlight. That's because we say strategy lights the way. It shows people where to step. Okay? So strategy answers how do we do what we do. If mission is what we are ultimately doing, it's what we're called to accomplish. Strategy is how we accomplish the mission. And so typically, this means our programs. And so when we talk strategy, we're talking programs. And really what we're talking about is how do our programs fit together to accomplish our mission. So what happens at a lot of churches is you come in, feels great, values, I'm on board, mission, I hear it, sounds great, how do I get involved? Somebody says, how do I get involved around here? And in a lot of churches, we just give them a long list of stuff. We go, here, just pick one, right? And nobody knows what to do first, second, or third. And so in our strategy, what we're trying to do is take that long list of programs and organize it into a map so that people can see, go here, go here, go here, and you'll be a part of the mission of the church. We've designed these programs to fit together this way. Okay? And so for that reason, we say that strategy is our missional map because it's actually a map of our programs and how we accomplish our mission. And we say it's where Joe goes because it's actually a set of venues where Joe can arrive at a particular place at a particular time to participate in the life of the church. Okay? So then the last side of the vision frame we talk about is measures or outcomes. We're starting to change this from measures. Your sheet probably says outcomes. I apologize that it doesn't match the slide. But we use here a target because this is what we're aiming for. This is what we want to see happen. And so it's worth mentioning here that most times in church, our default measures or our default outcomes are attendance and giving. So like next Thursday, I'll go to a circuit meeting with other pastors from my circuit, and they'll say, how are things going at your church? And the kind of answer they'll expect is a number of how many people show up on Sunday, right? And so attendance and giving, well, the pews are full and the budget's balanced, so things are going well. Right? That's our default measures around church. The trouble is that you and I both know attendance and giving are not effective measures of discipleship success. Just because someone's showing up doesn't mean they're actually growing in the Lord. And so what we want to be able to name in our measures or our outcomes is what does discipleship success look like for us? Because if all churches are called to glorify God and make disciples, and our mission helps us answer how we glorify God and make disciples uniquely, then our measures answer when are we successful? It's how do we know that the mission has been accomplished? And so what we're looking for are marks of a person. So we call these missional life marks. And so these are attributes of an individual that we believe God has called Zion to cultivate in people. And that becomes our indication of whether our mission is being accomplished, is whether people are being shaped and formed into the kind of people that God has called us to develop. And so our measures, we create a set of missional life marks that give us a picture of the kind of disciple that we're called to make. And so for that reason, we say that this is what Joe becomes. If Joe comes around our church for a while, gets involved in our programs, and gets to know our people, Joe will hear us talk about the mission. Joe will feel the values coming through in every environment. Joe will go through the strategy, and Joe will become the measures. Okay? So those four things are the vision frame. And so we say mission, values, strategy, and outcomes, or measures. That summarizes who we are as a church. And so it's that we want to clarify to be able to state clearly who we are to anybody who comes in or anytime we're hiring or anything like that. So what do you like best about that vision frame, or what questions do you have about that? Yes, so what I would imagine is if you're imagining that should be a component of how we help people discover, yes. So what I would say is there's probably a component of your strategy that is gifts discovery or gifts development that's going to inform how people are being shaped. Absolutely, yeah. And again, I would say if every church is unique, some churches have a greater appreciation and awareness of the necessity of those things, and some have less. So, yeah. Thanks. Somebody else? Things you like best or questions you have? Oh, great. Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yes, yep. She said she likes the emphasis on discipleship. There's been kind of a renaissance of discipleship here since an engagement with PLI, so thank you. Somebody else, something you like or a question you have? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, perfect. She said she likes how it's holistic and takes everything into account. Yeah, thank you. Somebody else, something you like or a question you have? Great. Then we'll advance a couple of slides to the vision proper slide. Perfect. There we go. So then, so again, with that identity set, then we're able to look through that frame to craft a strategic plan that is vision proper. When we say we're looking for vision, this is what we mean. And so vision proper answers, where is God taking us? It's missional mountaintops and milestones. And the reason we use those two terms is because we're saying that vision needs to inspire and integrate. And so the way that we do vision planning in this process is we come up with inspiring, compelling pictures of the future that could tend toward the abstract, as well as concrete milestones that help us to know how we're going to be making progress. And so vision needs to inspire and integrate. It needs to be inspirational and operational. And so it's missional mountaintops and milestones. And vision becomes what Joe sees. So what we want to be able to do with vision is a good, compelling vision should be something I can actually see in my mind's eye. And so when we're able to paint that full picture for our people that we're leading and the people that we're welcoming, then when we do that effectively, we're able to say, hey, come over here, look off in the distance with me. You see 5 to 10 years in the future, can you see with me what I see about where Zion is going? So vision becomes what Joe sees. And so we're able to build a strategic plan that does that. So that's the process and deliverables. Now we're in the phase, right? You just get to ask me questions, and I can tell you all about it. So what do you hear that you like, or what questions do you have? The floor is open.
Just to let you know, we do, among the leaders of the congregation, we do have a process of strategic planning, which we've been doing for years. I'm not sure how faithful we've been at connecting it to the Constitution and the objectives that we have written there. but we do try to stay with understanding the mission of the church. At least they're being inspired to do that.
Yep.
And then each group, every group has been asked to do that. We actually put that plan together and have it prepared for each year. That way I encourage the newer members to please take a look through that plan to see if there's anything there that would connect them to the life of the church. So there's been some of that going on, but there's just so many aspects of planning for the future that just isn't done in that process. So.
Yes, and and what Pastor is talking about is one of the things we say is vision is for everyone. So it sounds like that's the intention around here, right? Is that like when we craft vision as a strategic plan, we try to get it out to everybody. Sometimes people don't understand how vision connects to their individual ministry area or how they can be a part of it. One of the great things about the tool that we use in this process is there's a summary of your strategic plan that fits on one 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. And so it's 10 goals across 4 time horizons, stated in a what we call in a vivid way, and so in a compelling way. And so what I like to say is like if it can function like an accordion. I can give you a 2-minute overview of the vision or a 2-hour overview of the vision. And in that way, then I'm able to deliver the right amount of information to the right people at the right time to make sure we're keeping everybody on the same page. Yeah, that's like there's a deeper dive on that tool we didn't do here, but I could tell you more about it.
So what would be your typical elevator speech for a congregation with a vision?
With what?
Elevator speech, like a 90-second, like
For a congregation with what?
with their vision.
With their vision. Like a unique one or just in general?
Your choice.
Okay, so like for us, the church that I lead, we've been operating for a few years with a 5-year vision that we would experience our ministry to be like sun breaking through the clouds. So what we said when we were 5 years old was we believe that God has built a base of a church here when we were as a 5-year-old church. We said it's a base of light and warmth. The people who come to us are discovering their hearts are being thawed and they're being warmed in Christ-centered community. So that's a uniqueness of our church. But we did over the second 5 years of our church, we didn't just want to make that single source of light and warmth bigger and bigger and bigger. What we wanted to do was reach the people who are caught in the shadows in our community. And so we said, our community is going to break forth like sun rays through the clouds. So tangibly what that's meant is we've been intentionally training people to build community in their homes and in their neighborhoods. Rather than merely inviting people in, we've said, why don't you take what you found here and you be that light in your neighborhood? And so we are training and resourcing for that. So that's just our longest range, compelling picture. And then below that, we set and reset 3-year goals, such as things like right now, we're working on building out a more sustainable staff structure. As an 8-year-old church, I'm the founding pastor. I was the only staff person. One of the reasons I like bivocational ministry is I can add part-time people who have skills I don't have. And so we've been building out that team as a 3-year goal. We have a 3-year goal of codifying our discipleship curriculum. One of the things we found is we have some signature discipleship courses that people from other churches want to go through. And so they go, we're not looking to change churches, but we heard about this program and we'd like to go through it. And so we've been working on how do we codify those resources so we can share them with other churches in our county. It's about doing discipleship one-on-one. So transitioning from just running programs to getting people into mentoring relationships. That's another one of our current 3-year goals. And then I think the 4th one is about pledging time and money. And so that's the long range summary of our vision. So, yeah. Other thoughts, things you like best, questions you have?
Hold on, Chris.
Did you say the process was going to take like 8 to 9 months?
Yes. So typically what we do is it's a series of meetings, basically. So 3, like a full day meeting. It's usually I run the meeting like 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Okay. And so the rethink is one. The uncover, so that's the pumpkin jars is one, where we do an overview and we identify obstacles. The uncover phase of identifying the kingdom concept, that's 1. Each side of the frame is 1. And then the strategic planning go-ahead phase is a 2-day vision planning retreat. So we try to do 2 days back to back. And then there's usually 1 or 2 days of training for the live-out content. And then again, this is where, like in the occasion of a senior pastor transition, like we did at St. Michael, we did those first 6, actually, and then we did like 1 that was focused on that transition process after we crafted the vision frame. And then we paused while they did the call process. And then we came back and picked that back up. Yeah. So that's 2, 6, 7, 8 on-site visits in the standard process. Sometimes what's happening is if we want to talk specifically about staff structure, or if we want to talk specifically about discipleship design, sometimes we're adding in a little extra training on the back end. And so that's why I say 8 to 10 months, because sometimes we're adding things on the end. Yeah.
How does the information that the 8 to 10 people come up with,
Yep.
how does that get back to the congregation?
Yeah. So did everybody hear the question? How does the content that the vision team develops make it to the congregation? So this is where it's helpful for me to talk about cascading leadership communication. So I like to talk about communication in 3 kind of concentric circles. It's input, dialogue, first to know. Okay? So the input that's the level of communication we have at that vision team level. So the people who are fully engaged in the process are giving the most input. Then what happens is after we develop mission and values, that's 1, and after we develop strategy and outcomes, that's 2. In the typical process I run, there are 2 what we call wet cement meetings. So this is when we go out to that dialogue kind of phase. So what we do is we bring in 1/8 of the congregation into a structured 2-hour meeting where we present to them the mission and we present to them the values, and we have roundtable discussion to get their feedback and reflections about what's been developed. Their feedback and reflections then can inform the vision team to make adjustments based on the feedback of that 1/8 of the congregation. And so we call it a wet cement meeting because what we're saying is, hey, we've done a good amount of work. We've dug the foundation. We've dug the platform. We've set the forms. We called in the truck. We poured the cement. We smoothed it over. Now we're going to show it to you. We can change it. We just want you to know that it's like we've done 80% of the work already. We're checking in with you because we don't think we should finalize it until you get to talk about it with us. And so that's 1/8 of the congregation, assuming that's kind of your next level of invested leadership, which really is like probably the number of people. Like when I describe that number to most churches, they go, oh, so like a voters meeting. Because it ends up being about the number of people who show up to a voters meeting, okay? Because that's the number of people who are willing to show up to a meeting. Then we talk about first to know. So we're usually developing a communications plan toward the end of the process to talk about how we're going to roll this out to the whole congregation. And so there is that next level of people who are leaning in. They just might not come to a meeting. Okay? And so we would develop a way to roll it out to the congregation and then implement it. And so again, one of those wet cement meetings we do after mission values and after strategy outcomes. Yeah, does that help?
Yeah, what would you say would be a key 1 or 2 or 3 indicators that a church needs to go through this process a second or third or fourth time?
Yes. So I'm assuming part of the reason you're asking the question is you're going, we've done this before, why do we need to do it again?
Like Hurricane Ian, like COVID-19.
So you're saying those are reasons you might go through it again? Yes, correct. He answered his question masterfully. So certainly there are times when cataclysmic events occur that shift the context for our ministry, and at that time it's helpful. I'll also add this. We tend to say that mission and values are timeless, strategy and outcomes are timely. So what we mean by that is our mission and values will change less frequently than our strategy and outcomes. That's because disciple-making strategy and characteristics of a disciple change more with the culture that we are embedded in. Mission and values are more kind of intrinsic to our DNA. Now, saying that, then I say there's some research that indicates that churches kind of reset every 20 years or so in terms of identity. And so when I say mission and values are timeless, I really mean they'll last the life of a congregation, which is really about 20 years before your congregation resets. Okay? So that speaks to some of that. But as Pastor and Terry mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, a lot has happened at Zion over the last few years, and we anticipate a lot to keep happening. And so certainly being clear about who we are. And I'll also say a handful of churches I've worked with, they want clarity of vision because they're concerned about the trajectory of their church. More and more I'm getting to work with churches who want clarity because there's so much momentum and growth in their church. I'm going to start next month with the church in North Carolina that the pastor says, I seriously anticipate us to double in size in the next 3 years. And he's like, so if we're not clear now, like it's going to be harder to maintain clarity as we double in size. And so he's like, I want to make sure that we have clarity so we can steward that momentum. And I get the feeling that that's the kind of thing you're looking for here. Yeah. Other thoughts or questions? All questions are answered. Yeah, no, for sure. I have this effect on a lot of people. Yeah.
A lot of deer in the headlights.
Yes,
here.
we've covered a lot of information. So again, I'll just ask one more time. So far, what you've heard, what do you like best? What's making you feel good that you've heard? That there's a plan in progress. Yeah, there's a lot of times I show this to people that are like, I don't understand all of it, but I like that there's a process. So yeah, that's great. Anybody else, something you like best?
Hold on for just a second. We do need to get this online so people online can hear it. He's with Mary, and he'll come up to you here in just a second. He ran back there first.
Okay. I like when you were speaking about values, and that's the fire that burns within us, and that when we lose that, we go back to the mission. We go back to the mission. And I really, really like that because sometimes we need that. We need to go right back to the starting point. So.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
And up here to Cheryl.
I think what I like best is when we have a lot of things that we have going on and new things at the church, exciting things, but how do we know what success is or how we've accomplished our goals? And so when we look at establishing measurables, then we, rather than subjectively saying, oh yeah, that's going great.
Yeah.
How do we know it's going great?
Yeah.
And who are we impacting?
Yes, that's great. And again, that's that thing about like, we could do anything, Sometimes I like to say, we could sell the building and start over. And everybody goes, right? Like, well, of course we wouldn't do that, right? But we could. And so it's having a clear vision helps us to know what we must do, not just what we could do. That's great.
That raises another question. Do you ever work with a church where they have done all of this and then decided we're doing this ministry or this program and it really doesn't fit where we think we're going, so they drop it?
Oh, yes. So I think the question was, has a church ever eliminated programs because they didn't fit in where God was calling them to go? Absolutely. And that's actually what the strategy is designed to do. The strategy in particular gives us a rubric for evaluating our programs to see what fits and what's taking us in the right direction. Yeah. Are there anything else you like best that you want to share? Great.
Yeah, I'd like to try and give some clarity as to where are we going from here, So it's like, just so that you're aware of it, I would like to invite any of you or anybody that's online that has a passion to maybe serve on this team that we would form, a visioning committee or team, if you have a real passion for that, email me, okay? Let me know so that I can at least identify who you are, because there are certain folks that we need on this committee. And you will probably fit one of those, especially as I'm looking around here today, for sure. But we will, again, it is a limited group that's doing the actual, work there. And it's not the executive board either. It's a variety of folks within the congregation that are brought together to do this. So just let me know. And even if you don't contact me and you don't have a passion, I may try to fan the flame in your life, because we, as a visioning committee, have already started to identify that group of people. And you may already be on there, but we really do want people that are very passionate about this, that really want to sit down and meet on a regular basis and be part of the process. So, the executive board has been working together with the endowment group and found out that we could actually finance this to do this. We're kind of hesitant yet because we wanted to present it to the congregation today, and we will reiterate that at the voters' assembly. That's what I've envisioned. By the way, David Bulow was going to be here today. He had some other family commitments that came along, and that's why he's not able to be here. He was going to actually, and Terry, generously, well, I actually chose Terry to come and do this. But he wasn't reluctant. He knows the importance of this, and this is why we're doing what we're doing. And then we're hoping that after that meeting that we can go ahead and secure your services and move ahead on this. It's just such an important thing. When I I've been meeting with Pastor John over the last years, and I've been listening to what he's been doing. And then when this came along too, on top of what he was talking about, I was like, this makes sense. We did years ago. We did Transforming Churches Network, and it was a very key way in which we can identify how can we better serve our community, and we've been doing it ever since. It's still happening even to this day. Maybe not with the intensity as we've had in the past, but it's still happening today. And it's time to really get some clarity on, where are we going to go together, and does everybody really understand how all of these new things that are happening within the church, the discipleship, the outreach in the Oasis, the ECC now expanding to a school. There's a lot going on all at the same time. It'd be nice for everybody to be on board together, that we all share in the vision together too. And that opportunity will be given as he explained so well here just a minute ago too. So, any thoughts about this whole program one last time here before we close? I can't identify the. I can just tell you they give you different ideas of like newer folks that have just joined the church to.
She means what's required, right? Time commitment.
Oh, I don't know.
Yes. So typically the way we're operating is it's 1 6-hour day a month. So
that's good to know.
Yes.
That's huge.
So it's 1 6-hour day a month. So again, like to get from Rethink through the vision frame process, there would be 6 meetings in there over 6 months.
How many potty breaks would there be?
A lot. Well, 4 per day usually. So that's a 6-hour day, including a 30-minute lunch and like 3 10-minute breaks. So they're intense days. I bring you a binder. I bring you all your handouts every day. We're writing notes. We're working on flip charts. We're doing the whole deal. And so yeah, that's how it works. Yeah.
Hold on, Terry.
Can I include people on that are not here, so that we can have Zoom people in the meeting as well as physical people in the
We've identified a few
meeting?
that we believe would be very much an
So
asset
the
to
question is,
Yeah, that's
what
a
if
good
someone's
question.
not here? And so what I would say is, yes, they could participate virtually. It's not my favorite. And so what I would typically be doing in a church like this is going, could we position those meetings in a time frame when those people are here? Would be my first question. I've done this lots of different ways, so we can do it a lot. We can be adaptable. I'll always tell you what I think is the best choice. And for me, the best choice is always live and in person. Yeah. Any other questions?
Any answers? We always ask for that.
Yeah,
There
so
we go.
from here, what I would do is I'll make sure I sync up with Pastor and Terry and Jim, right?
Yep.
And-
And Jim's online right now.
Okay, great. Hey, Jim. And put together a formal proposal that kind of outlines everything, and then that can be what you can take under consideration. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
If that's all, does anybody else have anything? We appreciate your time in
Yeah,
coming down here,
glad
because
to
you
be
got to
here.
go back home to
Yeah,
get
yeah.
ready for tomorrow, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's
So-
great.
But yeah, why don't we just, let's just close as we do our voters' meetings with the singing of the doxology, okay? Praise God from whom all blessings flow. Praise Him, all creatures here below. Praise Him above, ye heavenly hosts. Praise Father, Son, and Holy Ghost.